I found myself idling away time in a charming little import shop just a stone's throw from Piccadilly Circus, nestled in the heart of London. I wasn't on any particular mission, simply perusing the array of curiosities adorning the shelves. "Hello, Nicholas." The sound of a familiar feminine voice called out a name I hadn't heard in quite some time. Turning, I found myself caught in the gaze of a pair of brown eyes that still had the power to quicken my heartbeat. It's remarkable how a flood of emotions can engulf you in mere moments. There was a flutter in my chest, a mix of surprise, confusion, a fleeting desire to embrace this woman, only to settle finally on a cold bitterness. I held her gaze for what seemed like an eternity, but was likely only a few seconds. "Hello, Tiffany." "What a surprise," I replied, turning my attention back to the shelves, not particularly eager to engage in conversation, but fully aware that it was inevitable. Tiffany was not one to leave things unsaid. "Got a moment to spare? Perhaps you'd indulge me in a cup of coffee, and we can catch up," Tiffany suggested playfully. "I doubt it, Tiffany. While I may have the time, I'm not certain we have much to discuss," I stated plainly. I had no interest in extending pleasantries with the woman who had appended my life. I knew she would persist, but she'd have to work for it. There was a soft sigh before she pleaded, "Please, Nicholas, I truly would like to talk, and I'll even treat you to coffee." I stared at her blankly for a moment before relenting. "Very well, but call me Nikki. Nicholas is a name I've left behind," I insisted. She rolled her eyes slightly, her tone tinged with a hint of arrogance as she retorted, "I believe I've earned the right to call you Nicholas if I so choose." "Fair enough, Bubbles. Have it your way," I replied, a touch of bitterness seeping into my words. Her composure visibly faltered at the mention of the affectionate nickname I had long buried along with our past. In happier times, I used to playfully sneak up behind her, wrapping my arms around her and teasingly fondling her. In a playful, whiny tone, I'd often say, "Come on upstairs, Bubbles, and give me some love. I'm desperate, Bubbles. I need you. Please, Bubbles, let's strip down." Predictably, she'd shriek and respond with a laugh. "Get away, you pervert. You're not getting any love until I'm ready. Go cool off with a cold shower, you randy booger." These playful exchanges would often devolve into me chasing her around the house or getting sprayed with a kitchen sprayer. It was all in good fun, and we both cherished those moments. Those were truly wonderful times. As she grew flustered, she paused, contemplating quietly for a moment. "I see your point, Nikki," she murmured softly, a hint of sadness in her voice. I was taken aback by her reaction, sensing there was much more to her surrender than mere words could convey. She strode purposefully towards the counter and engaged the proprietor in a language completely unfamiliar to me. The petite Asian woman behind the counter glanced at me, offered a somewhat solemn nod, and then gestured for us to follow her to a small coffee bar tucked away at the back of the shop. Two modest tables, each surrounded by wicker-style chairs, awaited us. We chose a table, took our seats, and soon the now smiling woman returned with 2 steaming cups of coffee. Without a second thought, Tiffany opted for the chair facing the coffee bar and the wall, while I instinctively moved around the table to take the chair position towards the door. Muscle memory, it seemed, was unwavering. This was a routine we had repeated countless times over the course of our 24 years of marriage. I always had to face the door, a remnant of a nervous tic acquired during my tour of duty in Vietnam. Despite the passage of time, we still clung to our rituals. I believe we both acknowledged it, judging by the faint, curious smile that briefly graced Tiffany's features. For a long moment, silence enveloped us, and despite my best efforts to resist, my thoughts drifted back to the last time I had seen this remarkable woman who was once my wife. We resided in a cozy Connecticut town, and I believed our marriage was a happy one. However, over several months, my wife had appeared increasingly distant. Though we interacted daily, I could sense a growing divide between us. Despite my efforts to brush it aside, I doubled down on my attempts to reconnect with her, striving to bring her back into our shared happiness. Our 2 children had already flown the nest, navigating their paths into adulthood. Scott, our eldest at 23, had recently graduated from college. He'd married a charming woman named Sherry during his senior year, and the two commuted from their small New Jersey townhouse to their jobs in New York. Their love was palpable and inspiring. Our younger child, Molly, a spirited 21-year-old, was the apple of my eye, a special bond between father and daughter. She'd been quite the handful during her high school years, but by her second year of college, she'd embraced maturity, soon to complete her bachelor's degree with numerous accolades on the dean's list. It was a revelation. Engrossed in editing an upcoming article for one of my employer's magazines, I received a surprise call from my wife. "Hello, Nicholas. It's Tiffany. Would you be up for lunch today? I know it's short notice, but I thought it might be fun to break from our routine." I couldn't contain my excitement. "Absolutely, babe, that sounds wonderful. I'm so glad you called. Do you have a place in mind, or should I make the choice?" "Meet me at Café Paris in, let's say, 45 minutes. Does that work for you?" Tiffany asked, her tone composed and professional. Though a hint of distance lingered, it felt like a step in the right direction. I was filled with joy and optimism for a thaw in our relationship. "I'll be there with bells on. Should I dress up a bit?" I quipped, attempting to lighten the mood and convey my delight. "Please do," she responded, her tone lacking amusement. "All right, see you at 12:15. Thanks, babe, this means a lot. Love you," I said, rising from my desk with a wide grin as I reached for my jacket. "Okay, see you soon," she replied simply. With a skip in my step, I hurried to my car and drove across town to rendezvous with my beloved wife for lunch. The simple gesture filled me with indescribable elation. As I entered the cafe, I spotted her at a table, sipping on a glass of wine. Reaching out, I touched her shoulder and leaned in for a kiss, only to be met with a slight turn of her head and the offering of her cheek. In hindsight, that gesture should have spoken volumes. With a foolish smile, I greeted her, "Hello, gorgeous. Ready for our date?" She smirked slightly, replying, "Let's order first, and then we can talk." As we placed our orders, she engaged in small talk about her translation projects at International Trade Incorporated, the import/export company where she worked as a language specialist. I listened attentively, though a sense of unease began to gnaw at me. It was evident that she was preoccupied. She barely touched her food. When the dishes were cleared, she insisted on paying the bill with her business credit card, assuring me that her boss was aware she was treating me to lunch. For a prolonged moment, she remained silent, her gaze fixed downward. Just as I was about to inquire about her demeanor, she looked up, meeting my eyes with a solemn expression. "Nicholas, there's no easy way to say this," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I've been having an affair for about 8 months. I love him, and I want a divorce." Stunned, shocked, and utterly devastated, I sat there in silence, unable to form a coherent response. In an instant, my world shattered into a million pieces. Despite the horrors I had witnessed in wartime, nothing could have prepared me for this gut-wrenching blow. I felt utterly broken, lost in the depths of despair. Unable to think, unable to speak, I was engulfed by an overwhelming sense of loss. She proceeded to divulge that her paramour was incredibly wealthy, a billionaire in fact, and that all expenses related to the divorce would be covered by him. Given his substantial wealth, they had no intention of seeking any assets from the divorce. I could retain everything. I vaguely recall her mentioning something about preserving my modest estate, accompanied by a disdainful air quote gesture. Though I knew she was speaking, her words fell on deaf ears. It was as if I were trapped in a tunnel, watching her lips move without hearing a single sound. Each word felt like a tolling bell, heralding my impending doom. Continuing, she insisted, "This is truly what I desire, Nicholas, and it's in both of our best interests if you don't contest it. Resistance will only prolong the agony, with the same inevitable outcome. I leave for Europe tonight with him, and I won't return until after the divorce is finalized. Please allow this to proceed without interference. You've always prioritized my happiness, and this is something that will bring me immense joy. I'll reach out to the children once I'm settled in Paris. Their reaction is uncertain, but you needn't concern yourself with that." With those words, she rose from her seat and exited my life, leaving me seated in disbelief, grappling with the staggering reality of what had just transpired. The aftermath of my wife's departure was nothing short of harrowing, especially when it came to breaking the news to our children. They were just as shocked and wounded as I was. With Tiffany failing to contact them, I was left to deliver the devastating revelation myself. To my dismay, I even faced accusations of foul play, with some suggesting I had harmed her and disposed of her body. The months that ensued were a nightmare, filled with bitter arguments and painful soul-searching as my children and I grappled with the fallout. Desperate for answers, I discreetly gathered information about Tiffany's new partner from her workplace and scoured the internet for any trace of him. Thankfully, I stumbled upon a few pictures of them together, which dispelled any suspicions of my involvement in her disappearance. Curiously, her presence was notably absent from these images, hinting at a desire for privacy in their relationship. After a year of turmoil, I slowly began to rebuild my life and reclaim my sense of purpose. Forming connections with disgruntled former colleagues of Tiffany's, I uncovered a shocking revelation. Upper management had been complicit in covering up her affair, driven by the financial interests of their business ties with her lover's companies. Learning that her rendezvous had taken place during work hours on company premises was the final straw. I pursued legal action against her employer, and now I'm living comfortably off their settlement, seeking retribution for the pain they caused. 3 years have passed since that fateful lunch, and here I am, sitting across from my former wife in a public setting, feeling a mix of emotions as I contemplate the twists and turns of fate that brought us here. Despite her still striking appearance, meticulously styled clothes, flawless hair, and impeccably applied makeup, there was a weariness, a sadness lurking in her eyes. Those once vibrant brown eyes, which I had always admired, now seemed devoid of life. Where once they danced with joy and excitement, today they were dull, extinguished. Happiness seemed to evade her still. "You're looking good, Nicholas." Mickey," she began the conversation, her tone hesitant. "Thinner, perhaps, and a bit more muscular." "Thanks," I replied simply, allowing her to take the lead. This was her arena. She wanted this conversation. "It's hard to believe we've crossed paths here in London. What are the odds?" she continued, probing for an opening. "Yes, quite unlikely," I responded, deflecting her attempt. "I've been doing a lot of translation work in my new role, and I've even picked up a couple of new languages," she persisted, searching for a connection. "That's always been one of your remarkable talents. You're an incredibly talented and beautiful woman," I finally conceded, breaking the silence. Suddenly, she looked down, tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't receive any recognition anymore. I'm not even sure if anyone remembers I exist." "I would have thought your partner would be eager to show you off to the world," I remarked, attempting to comfort her. "He never saw fit to marry me. I'm nothing more than a convenient companion who can speak a few languages. When he wants to impress someone, he parades me out to entertain them and converse in their native tongue. A middle-aged American woman who can speak multiple languages, play tour guide, and is willing to engage in intimate encounters is apparently a rare commodity. I've become nothing more than a prized escort," she confessed, her voice tinged with sorrow. "Why don't you just leave? Get on the next plane and get out of there," I blurted out, my frustration boiling over. "It's complicated," she replied, her tone tinged with resignation. "I live a very comfortable life, but I'm under constant surveillance. It would be incredibly difficult for me to escape. I can only speak with you now because we happened to cross paths by chance, and I haven't left the store. Plus, Kelly, the owner, is a friend who helps me out if I need to lay low for a while." "It sounds like a nightmare, but ultimately it's your decision," I conceded, attempting to mask my concern. "Okay, let's change the subject. Why didn't you ever reach out to the kids?" "I had a hell of a time convincing them I hadn't done something to you. They were devastated when they never heard from you." Her expression grew even more somber. "I wasn't allowed to," she explained, her voice heavy with sorrow. "I left that afternoon on a private jet, and all ties to my former life were severed. As I mentioned, I'm under constant surveillance." Suddenly, she leaned forward, meeting my gaze directly. "Nicholas, I can't begin to express how many nights I've spent alone in a lavish house in some exotic location, wishing I were still beside you in our home in Connecticut. God, I miss you and what we had. I felt myself slipping back into an old pattern, the instinct to fix everything for Tiffany, to make her happy, tugging at me. But as I felt the familiar pull, I halted abruptly. Wait, hold on, I interjected, raising my hands in a gesture of surrender. I can't fix your life for you. More importantly, I won't fix your life. How dare you sit here and complain about your circumstances? You brought this upon yourself. You made the choices that led you here. Countless people I care about have been forced to navigate a situation you created for them. It wasn't their choice, their desire, or their doing. Their lives were irrevocably altered because of decisions you made without their consent or consideration. It's been over 3 years since we last crossed paths, and yet already it's all about you. Damn it, I'm exhausted already. Do you realize you haven't even asked about your own children? What kind of mother does that? Just so you know, you're a grandmother now. Scott and Sherry have a beautiful little girl who will be 2 years old in a couple of months. Her name, in case you're interested, is Christine Long, and Molly, your daughter, remember her? She's planning to marry a wonderful man named Lester in 6 months. She's still holding out hope that you'll be at the wedding, but it's difficult when we have no way of reaching you. Maybe I'll send the invitation here. As my emotions threatened to overwhelm me, I took a moment to steady my breathing. But the floodgates had opened, and all the buried anger and pain surged to the surface. And as for me, what did I do to deserve this treatment? I demanded, my voice trembling with emotion. I loved you with every fiber of my being, with everything I had to give. And how did you repay me? You discarded me without so much as a goodbye. Do you even realize you've never apologized for the wreckage you left behind in my life? So don't sit there and play the victim. You've destroyed everything. You lost us. You lost me. Looking for sympathy. You won't find it here. You forfeited that privilege 3 damn years ago in a little cafe in Connecticut. I was on the brink of storming out, mirroring her departure 3 years prior when a heavenly voice, accompanied by a distinct English accent, pierced through the heated tension. Nikki, I can't leave you alone for 5 minutes without you charming some beautiful woman. I swear I should beat you to a bloody pulp, she quipped, her green eyes twinkling with mischief. I hadn't even noticed Isabella's arrival amidst my tirade. I offered a warm smile and introduced them, hi baby. Isabella, I'd like you to meet Tiffany, my ex-wife. Tiffany, this is Isabella, my lady friend. Tiffany, still reeling from my earlier outburst, now faced her replacement, struggling to maintain her composure. Isabella extended her hand in a gesture of friendship and greeted Tiffany with a smile. I'm very glad to make your acquaintance, Tiffany. Nikki has mentioned you often, though not always in the fondest light, I'm afraid. But I suppose I should thank you for releasing this charming troublemaker and giving me the opportunity to win him over. He can be a handful, but I'm slowly getting him house trained. With a playful glance at me, Isabella affectionately smoothed my shoulder and added, Nikki, my adventurous American, I'm afraid we must be on our way if we're going to catch the train to Ely. Apologies for the interruption, but time is of the essence. I gave Isabella's leg a reassuring pat and said, no worries, my sweet. I was just about finished. Then, turning to Tiffany, who still seemed to be struggling, I spoke gently, we need to get going, but thank you for the coffee and the chance to catch up. I'll pass along your greetings to the kids, and I'll tell them you said you love them, even though it might be a stretch. With a polite handshake, I added, I truly hope you find happiness someday, Tiffany, though I think you're searching in the wrong places. And thank you for the 23 good years. Despite everything, they were mostly happy for me, and I'm grateful for that. Goodbye, Tiffany. Tiffany remained seated, her expression mirroring the shock I had felt 3 years earlier. Isabella and I made our way through the vibrant streets of London to catch her train. She didn't inquire about the meeting, but I sensed she had gleaned enough to understand it hadn't been a joyful reunion. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of freedom. Yes, there was freedom in letting go, and perhaps even a hint of happiness. Thank you for watching this video to the end. If you liked it, please like it and subscribe to the channel. See you soon.